how did that happen? You know, we're going to be transforming into fall or autumn before we know it, which means Halloween will be there before we know it. Whew. And just like those seasons, you know, we're constantly transforming as well, every moment. Now, because of that constant change, that statement, today is the first day of the rest of your life, brings new meaning, it brings new resonance, it's a constant calling, So say that with me. Today is the first day of the rest of my life. You have the power to start choosing more of those responses, more routinely, to transform intentionally. So that is no matter what's happened in the past. No matter what's happened in the past. But now I'm going to talk about the past. Last week, Reverend Lena, I do watch the recordings. Last week, Reverend Lena talked about those pesky feelings, and they're actually tools. And how we can get complacent in our emotional home. We get kind of stuck, don't we? We're in our set point. Now, my topic was motivated before I saw that by a podcast. So how many of you guys know who Mel Robbins is? She does a lot of podcasts with a lot of very interesting world-renowned experts. This one in particular was Dr. Mark Brackett. And he is the world's leading expert on emotional intelligence. So here we go again, emotional intelligence. He's the founder and the director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. Now, I've actually trained with him twice in person at the Mindful Leader conferences up in DC, and he really is a pretty amazing man with some great tools. I recommend looking into him. I almost changed the title of my talk since Reverend Lena had just talked about emotional intelligence, but I decided to stay with the theme instead. Now, the Dalai Lama tells us overcoming negative tendencies and enhancing positive potential are the very essence of the spiritual path. Hence, we got to repeat shit, excuse my language, over and over, because overcoming those negative tendencies is hard. Now, Dr. Brackett's studies show that 90% of success in virtually every aspect of life, whether it's career, relationship, love, family, is determined by how we deal with our emotions. And that's a skill most of us have never really been taught. Now, sometimes it looks like people can come by it naturally. Just like a musician, you know, I can't do that. Maybe if I practice real hard, I'd get to an eighth of where he's at, something like that. But we can get better. Whatever our kind of set point is with emotional intelligence, we can get better because it's a learned skill. Now, why do emotions matter? Dr. Brackett says that 1, emotions drive our attention, our memory, and our learning. Now think about that traumatized child in school. That child is in flight or fight mode all the time. How can they learn? How can they absorb? And those junior high kids with the raging hormones, has anybody ever taught junior high kids? Whew. I know once I grew boobs, all I could think about was getting guys to look at me. I wasn't taking diddly squat in, I swear. So, you know, yeah, it drives our attention. It really does, all those emotions. And, number 2, they drive our judgment. Boy, I made some awfully bad judgments after those things came in. Dr. Brackett's studies actually show, that there's teachers, he did a study with teachers, and they grade differently based on whether they're thinking about a good day or a bad day. They grade the same papers, 1 to 2 grades differently. Now, that's not based on the quality of the homework, those grade changes. We're making decisions and judgments based on the mood that we are in. Has anybody ever had Ben and Jerry's for dinner? Yeah, it's generally based on a mood, an emotion. Now, number 3, emotions drive the quality of our relationships. There are signals whether to approach or to avoid. So my facial expressions, my body language, and my vocal tone is going to send a signal. It's oh, Kay likes me, Kay respects me. I can approach her, right? Or, ooh, boy, Kay looks like she's judging me. I'm not going to approach her. Right? Actually, there was when my kids were little, my ex-husband used to, when we would be sitting at the dinner table, he could actually hear the tone of my voice, the pitch kind of changing, if it was that time of the month. And he would warn the kids, okay, kids, be careful. It's cycle mom time. So, that really happened to us. And I'm not married to that man anymore. No, he's a good guy. He really is. But, so also emotions, number 4, deal with our mental and physical health. I think we all know that. Little emotions become big emotions if they're not dealt with. So sad becomes hopeless. Hopeless becomes despair. Despair becomes depressed, and on and on and on. So we gotta recognize those emotions early and have those strategies to deal with them. Number 5, emotions influence our daily performance. Dr. Brackett grew up in a working class family, and he became a professor at Yale. That's kind of a big hop, status hop. And so he had what you call imposter syndrome for years. That's where you feel like you don't fit in and somebody's going to figure out you're a fake. I remember feeling that when I first became a minister. But after 25 years at Yale, he's realized that these kids, they're the richest, most privileged, they have the most privileged upbringing, but they aren't necessarily successful if they haven't learned to deal with their feelings. They can't deal with feedback. They often can't deal with anxiety, and sometimes they can't deal with disappointment, right? So it doesn't matter where you come from. Dealing with those emotions really drives a lot about our life and how we're experiencing it. And Dr. Brackett reminds us that emotional intelligence is not a fixed trait. It's a skill we can learn. So he created something called the ruler skills of emotional intelligence. That's to help us get used to our feelings and emotions. Now, I didn't bring a copy for everybody, which I had intended to, but you can take a picture of this if it speaks to you afterwards. So, ruler, if you notice, you can probably see the colored ruler down the side. So the R stands for recognizing your emotions in yourself and others. So recognize this first. The social awareness piece has to be laser focused on paying attention to those facial expressions, the body language, and the vocal tone and the behavior. Kind of like this versus this, right? And that's not just in the people that we're interacting with, but ourselves. What are we putting out to the world? Approach me or stay away from me. And becoming, just recognizing that. It really can make a difference. Lena talked about projecting. That last week she talked about projecting what looks like what's on somebody's face to be judgment might be they're emotionally flooded. And so if a person stiffens up, maybe it's not you, maybe it's there's too much coming in. And Dr. Brackett says the antidote to that is to ask someone how they're feeling, not how they're thinking. Reverend Lena gave us a lot of good examples about how tough it is to drill down past the thinking to the feeling part. So he said don't be intimacy phobic. That means being afraid of asking people how they feel. Now, number 2 is the U for understanding. Understanding the causes and the consequences of the hidden driver. That is the hidden driver of emotional intelligence, because That's where we build our connection and our relationships. Have to have a common understanding about what emotion is. Like, we typically feel anxious about things that we care about the most. So if you're feeling anxious, what is it that you care about, that you're worried about? And what's the cause of anger? It's usually the result of a perceived injustice. Now, my perceived injustice might be different than your perceived injustice, but I need to realize that if you're angry, there's something underlying there. I don't have to agree with it, but I got to give you permission to feel that. And sometimes shame and anger can look like shame. So if you picture maybe a dad in the toy store with a toddler, and he can't afford to buy that toy for his son. And the toddler crying, I want it. And sometimes that dad will look like he's angry, put that toy down. But he's really in shame because he can't afford it. So our judgment sometimes can be wrong. Now, number 3, we've got labeling. Number 3 is about labeling. And again, Reverend Lena talked a lot about labeling our emotions accurately. And it's really interesting because anxiety is actually about uncertainty. Pressure is, there's something at stake that's dependent on my behavior. Fear is impending danger. And overwhelm means you're saturated with emotion. And stress is too many demands with not enough resources. What do you do when you're stressed? Too many demands without enough resources? You get more resources. If you can't get more resources, you try to have less demands. And if you can't do either, you got to figure out how to deal with it or walk away, right? And often what we label as stress is actually envy. So Dr. Brackett talked about those students, and they're, oh, I'm so stressed about my grades, and I'm so stressed about my social life. And it turned out they were actually envious of that guy over there that didn't have to study much and got an A. And that other guy over there who all the girls are flocking around. He's actually envious, and guess what? The antidote to that is? The antidote to that is gratitude. Again, Reverend Lena talked about gratitude and love. It's so important in this emotional intelligence range. And so focusing what's going on that's right is a skill. You practice it and you get better at focusing on what is going on that's right. And that can help deal with some of those emotions. Now, number 4, we got our E, that's expressing emotions appropriately. Expressing emotions appropriately. Oh boy, I think most of us are still working on that. But you got to ask, am I in a comfortable place where I can feel safe and be psychologically true to myself? Can I be open, or do I need to be guarded, whether it's home or classroom or work? It's the same. But you must know when and how to express those emotions. Permission to express your emotions is not permission to say everything you want. If you said everything you want and you're feeling to every person you meet, you're going to be one lonely person. Who knows the Big Bang Theory? Anybody who ever watched the Big Bang Theory? Yeah. Big Bang Theory is a bunch of super genius guys that are kind of nerdy, that are university professors in various science-themed, majors. Right? Thank you. They're all PhDs, doctors. And there's 12 seasons of this, and I've only seen a few because my brother told me to watch it way back when, so I couldn't watch it because he told me to do it. But I just watched the new spin-off, Stuart Fails to Save the Universe. Stuart was the comic book store owner, if anybody remembers, and kind of funny, but you know how the shows on streaming services, when it's over, they segue into something they think you're going to like. So it moves right on into the first episode of Big Bang Theory. So, okay, I watched it. And, of course, now I'm binging. And I just watched the episode where the genius nerd gang is about to meet their new university professor in their department boss. And he's apparently got suspect credentials, at least according to Sheldon. And you know, Sheldon, if you don't know the story, the show, he's the character, the most, I guess, nerdy genius out of all of them. Probably what we would call on the spectrum, but so super duper smart, but with about zero social skills. He introduced himself to his new boss as, "I'm the real scientist here." He did to call his boss a glorified high school science teacher whose last successful experiment was lighting his own farts. And then he didn't understand why he got fired. Yeah, we must understand the social norms, whether it's in the home or the workplace or the classroom. But sadly, 67% of us don't feel comfortable telling their loved ones how they feel. You know, that's something we can all work on, I think. All right, number 5, regulating emotions. Regulating emotions. You have to do that. You have to regulate them appropriately to achieve those goals. Whether it's in school, like those young kids that some of them that couldn't deal with their feelings and those emotions, or like Sheldon, who couldn't hold himself back from telling his boss off. You know, it's usually not the best strategy, but it really impacts our relationships and our work life and our spiritual fulfillment. So thoughts and actions, such as anxiety, reducing anxiety about this talk I'm giving. You know, I had to do some research, and I had to kind of work out a plan so that I could reduce my anxiety. There's things we can do. One suggestion on how to regulate that Dr. Brackett had is that if somebody's having a tantrum or verbally abusing you and you can't walk away, visualize a frame around that person as they're going on and on. You got to be emotionally able to step back and mindful enough to step back and not let them dysregulate you to be able to do that. But he said observe them rather than absorb them in this picture frame, like a movie, and think, oh boy, I wish they'd had an emotional education when they were young. Or, gosh, I wish they had some emotional intelligence control. Or, boy, interesting that this adult is acting like a 5-year-old. So you can choose to give your feedback later and calmly. Much easier said than done. I'm just going to say, I'm glad John's not here to be able to give you some examples of when I didn't maybe practice that as well as I'd like to. But hopefully we can get better and better all the time. Observe others' behavior, don't absorb it. Much easier said than done, isn't it? Now you know, the unhealthy strategies are things like avoidance, binging, binging and drinking and overeating and negative self-talk. But there's nothing to fix. It's just about learning how not to do those. Lena gave everybody some really good strategies, like to regulate those emotions, like self-awareness and emotional regulation, being aware of how to emotionally regulate and expressing things in a healthy way. Also, that building of that vocabulary, that emotion vocabulary, and understanding what's driving those emotions when you recognize them, when you name them, can be helpful. And another thing Dr. Brackett suggested was something called temporal distancing. Kind of sounds like something Sheldon would talk about, doesn't it? But it means, how am I going to feel about this thing in a month? Right? Is this really worth going cray-cray for? Okay, the taking the walks and the deep breaths and all those things, listening to some music, those things are great strategies for in the moment to de-escalate, but if you don't get to the root of the issue, it's all gonna come back. You can develop these skills to have the power to choose their response, and that's where transformation is coming in. Something's calling me. You're always transforming because your body's changing, your mind's changing every minute of the day. Every time you deal with that emotion, you name that emotion, you have a positive interaction, you're spiritually evolving and lifting your energy. through that emotional intelligence and the mindfulness practices, the relationship insights, the movement practices, the spiritual integration, the wellness classes, the prayer, the coming together here at the Mindful Spiritual Center to lift and to learn. That's helping us with spiritual integration, and it's cumulative. Every time it builds, and it's stepping you into better coherence. Growth happens invisibly, like roots forming before a sprout appears, and transformation begins the moment you reach for the new, because God is already present. You're reaching for God, you're reaching for connection to Spirit, and that transformation is here. It's closer than you think, because Spirit is already speaking to you. That communication, that emotional intelligence and better communication includes talking to Spirit. Deepak Chopra says, this is the key to life, the ability to reflect, ability to know yourself, the ability to pause for a second before reacting automatically. The journey of transformation. And John 14:26 says, but the counselor, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you. All things will remind you of everything I have said to you. Now, that was Lena last week, me this week, and so many others so many times. We're all here to remind each other. So what's the smallest, most honest action you can take tomorrow that aligns with the person you're becoming rather than the person you've been? Just consider that for a moment. And maybe it starts with labeling your emotions. God bless.